Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The cab wound through the city streets, neon signs and glittering skyscrapers blurring past the window. Naomi leaned her head against the cool glass, closing her eyes for a moment. The events of the day washed over her. The unsettling doctor's appointment, the bittersweet encounter with her old neighbor, the dawning realization of just how thoroughly her old life had been erased. She took a deep breath, centering herself. She couldn't afford to let her emotions overwhelm her now. If she was going to survive in this strange new reality and hopefully find a way back to her true self, she needed to stay sharp. The cab pulled up in front of a sleek high-rise. Naomi paid the driver and stepped out, craning her neck to see the rooftop bar perched at the very top of the building. Muffled music and the faint sound of laughter drifted down from above. As she approached the entrance, a burly bouncer held up a hand. "Name?" "Naomi Parker," she said, the unfamiliar surname still awkward on her tongue. The man scanned his tablet, then nodded.
"Go right up. VIP section's been reserved for your party."
Naomi blinked in surprise. VIP treatment wasn't something she was used to in her old life. Just how wealthy and connected was this new version of herself supposed to be? The elevator ride to the top floor gave her a moment to collect herself. Naomi smoothed down her dress and ran a hand through her hair, still marveling at its silky length. She schooled her features into what she hoped was a convincing smile as the doors slid open. The rooftop bar was a scene straight out of a magazine spread. Stylishly dressed people mingled around sleek fire pits and plush seating areas. A DJ spun trendy beats from a raised platform, while bartenders in crisp white shirts mixed elaborate cocktails behind a marble bar. "Naomi, over here!" She turned to see Tiffany waving enthusiastically from a roped-off section near the edge of the roof. The redhead was sporting a slinky silver dress that caught the light with every movement. Naomi made her way over, accepting air kisses from Tiffany and the other girls from their friend group. She sank into a velvet armchair, taking in the panoramic view of the city skyline spread out before them. "We ordered a round of champagne," one of the women, Naomi thought her name might be Alexis, said with a grin.
"Figured we should celebrate your successful transformation."
"How are you feeling?" Naomi hesitated, choosing her words carefully.
"It's a lot to take in," she said finally. "Everything feels so different."
The others nodded sympathetically.
"Oh, honey, we've all been there,"
Tiffany said, patting her hand. "The first few weeks are always a trip, but trust me, pretty soon you won't be able to imagine living any other way." A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. As Naomi took a glass, she noticed a man at a nearby table watching their group intently. He was handsome in a polished, corporate way. Expensive suit, carefully styled hair. When he caught her eye, he raised his glass in a small salute.
"Ooh, looks like someone's noticed our gorgeous newbie," Alexis teased, following Naomi's gaze. "That's Daniel Roth. Total catch. He's some big shot at a tech company. Want me to introduce you?"
Naomi shook her head quickly. "No, that's okay. I'm not really looking to date right now." The thought of romantic entanglements in this unfamiliar body made her deeply uncomfortable. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. "Not looking to date? Girl, that's half the fun of a transformation. You've got a smoking hot new body. Might as well take it for a test drive." The other women laughed, but Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. Just how many people had gone through this process? And did none of them question the ethics of it all? She took a large sip of champagne, using the moment to gather her thoughts. "I guess I'm just curious about the whole transformation thing," she said, aiming for a casual tone. "I mean, how did you all find out about it? It's not exactly something they advertise on billboards." The mood at the table shifted subtly. The women exchanged glances, a flicker of something passing between them. Wariness? Concern? "Oh, you know how it is," Alexis said lightly. Word of mouth, mostly. A friend of a friend kind of thing. Tiffany nodded. Right. And once you're in the know, you start noticing the signs. People disappearing for a while and coming back looking completely different. Suddenly landing amazing new jobs or dating people way out of their old league. But why go through with it? Naomi pressed. It's such a huge change. Didn't any of you hesitate? Another loaded glance passed between the women. Finally, the quietest of the group, a willowy blonde named Chelsea, spoke up.
Some of us didn't exactly have a choice,
she said softly, her eyes fixed on her champagne glass.
But it was this or...
She trailed off, shaking her head. Tiffany shot Chelsea a warning look before turning back to Naomi with a too bright smile.
What matters is that we're all living our best lives now, right? Come on, let's dance. Can't let all this fabulousness go to waste.
As the others stood and made their way to the dance floor, Naomi hung back. Chelsea's words echoed in her mind. Some of them hadn't had a choice. What did that mean? Were there others like her, transformed against their will? She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Daniel approaching until he was right beside her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth as silk.
I couldn't help but notice you from across the room. I'm Daniel. Can I buy you a drink?
Naomi tensed. She wasn't equipped to handle male attention in this new body. But as she opened her mouth to politely decline, she caught sight of a small pin on Daniel's lapel. It was subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking closely, but the design was unmistakable, a stylized GG in gold. Glamour girls. Her heart raced. Could this man be connected to the organization responsible for her transformation? Making a split-second decision, Naomi pasted on her most dazzling smile. "I'd love one," she said. "I'm Naomi. It's a pleasure to meet you, Daniel." As he led her to the bar, Naomi's mind whirled. This could be her chance to gather some real intel. But she'd have to tread carefully. One wrong move, and who knew what consequences she might face. The night stretched ahead, full of possibilities and dangers. Naomi took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. Time to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. Daniel guided Naomi to a quiet corner of the bar, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching her. She fought the urge to flinch away, reminding herself that this was potentially her best lead yet. "So, Naomi," Daniel said as they settled onto sleek bar stools. "What's your poison?" "Gin and tonic," she replied, figuring it was a safe choice. As Daniel signaled the bartender, Naomi studied him surreptitiously. His manner was confident, bordering on smug, the kind of man used to getting what he wanted.
I haven't seen you around before,
he remarked. New to the city? Naomi hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Sort of, she hedged. I've been away for a while, just getting back into the swing of things. Daniel's eyes lit up with interest.
Ah, I see.
Well, welcome back. I'm sure you'll find a lot has changed. Their drinks arrived, and Naomi took a grateful sip, using the moment to gather her thoughts. She needed to steer the conversation towards glamour girls without seeming too obvious. You're right about that, she said. Everything feels so different. Even simple things like... She gestured vaguely at herself. Like shopping for clothes. I feel like I need a whole new wardrobe. Daniel chuckled.
I'm sure that can be arranged. In fact, I might know just the place. Have you heard of glamour girls?
Naomi's pulse quickened. She forced her expression to remain neutral. The name sounds familiar. A boutique?
So much more than that,
Daniel said, leaning in conspiratorially. They specialize in total transformations. Clothes, hair, makeup, even more intensive changes for those who are interested. Intensive changes? Naomi echoed, feigning innocence. What do you mean? Daniel's gaze swept over her appreciatively. Let's just say they can help anyone become their ideal self. No change is too drastic. A chill ran down Naomi's spine. This was it, confirmation that Glamour Girls was behind her transformation. But how deeply was Daniel involved? That sounds... Intriguing, she said carefully. How did you hear about them? A shadow passed over Daniel's face, so quickly Naomi almost missed it. Oh, word gets around in certain circles. He took a long sip of his drink.
But enough about that. Tell me more about you, Naomi. What do you do?
She scrambled for an answer, realizing she had no idea what her supposed career was in this new life. I'm in a transitional period right now, she said, exploring my options. Daniel nodded, a knowing glint in his eye.
Ah, yes,
post-transformation, I assume. Taking some time to adjust to the new you? Naomi's breath caught in her throat. He knew. But how much? Something like that, she managed. It's all still a bit overwhelming.
I can imagine,
Daniel said smoothly. But don't worry, we take care of our own. Before Naomi could process the implications of that statement, a commotion erupted near the entrance to the rooftop bar. Raised voices carried over the music, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Daniel was on his feet in an instant, his demeanor shifting from charming to commanding. Excuse me for a moment, he said tersely. Duty calls. As he strode towards the disturbance, Naomi's mind raced. This was her chance. She glanced around quickly, making sure no one was paying attention to her. Then, heart pounding, she reached across the bar and plucked Daniel's phone from where he'd left it. Her fingers trembled as she swiped the screen. To her surprise, it unlocked without requiring a passcode. Either Daniel was careless with his security or he wanted someone to access his phone. Pushing aside her unease, Naomi quickly navigated to his contacts. She scrolled rapidly, looking for anything related to glamour girls. Near the bottom of the list, a name caught her eye, Gigi Liaison. She tapped on it, revealing a phone number and email address. Fumbling in her purse, she pulled out her own phone and snapped a quick photo of the screen. Just as she was replacing Daniel's phone on the bar, a hand clamped down on her shoulder. Naomi jumped, nearly dropping both devices. She turned to find Tiffany standing behind her, eyes wide with alarm. "What are you doing?" Tiffany hissed, glancing nervously towards where Daniel was still dealing with the commotion. I was just... Naomi stammered, but Tiffany cut her off. "Never mind, we need to go, now!" Before Naomi could protest, Tiffany was dragging her towards the elevator. The other girls from their group materialized, forming a protective circle around them. "What's going on?" Naomi demanded as the elevator doors slid shut. Tiffany shook her head. "Not here. We'll explain everything, but we need to get somewhere safe first." The ride down to street level was tense, filled with meaningful glances between the other women that Naomi couldn't decipher. As they burst out onto the sidewalk, Chelsea pulled out her phone. "I'll call for a car," she said. "We can go to the safe house." "Safe house?" Naomi repeated, her head spinning. "Will someone please tell me what's happening?" Alexis placed a steadying hand on her arm. "We saw you with Daniel," she said quietly. "And we saw what you did with his phone. You're looking for answers about your transformation, aren't you?" Naomi's mouth went dry. She nodded mutely. "Oh, honey," Tiffany sighed. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. The women piled in, Naomi finding herself sandwiched between Tiffany and Alexis in the back seat. As the car merged into traffic, Tiffany turned to Naomi with a grim expression. "Okay, here's the short version. Glamour Girls isn't just some makeover service. It's part of a much larger operation. And Daniel? He's one of their top recruiters." "Recruiters for what?" Naomi asked, though a part of her already knew the answer. "For people like us," Chelsea said softly from the front seat. "People they can transform and use for their own purposes." Naomi's mind reeled. "But why? What do they want?" The women exchanged loaded glances. Finally, Alexis spoke. "It's complicated. Some of it is about money and power. Rich people paying for custom-designed companions or employees. But there's more to it than that. We think they're building some kind of network, placing transformed individuals in key positions across different industries." "For what purpose?" Naomi pressed. Tiffany shrugged. That's what we're trying to figure out. We're part of a group working to expose glamour girls and shut down their operation. But it goes deep. Really deep. Naomi sat back, trying to process this flood of information. So all of you, you're not really friends? It's all an act? Not exactly, Chelsea said. We were all transformed by glamour girls. But some of us started to remember our old lives, to question things. We found each other and started working together.
We've been watching you, Alexis added, waiting to see if you'd start to break through the conditioning. When you went to your old apartment today, we knew it was time to make contact.
Naomi's head spun. You've been following me. Protecting you, Tiffany corrected. And now we need to get you somewhere safe. Daniel will have realized by now that you accessed his phone. They'll be looking for you. As if on cue, Naomi's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Her blood ran cold as she read the message from an unknown number. Naughty girl, did you really think it would be that easy? See you soon, Naomi. Or should I say, Sarah? Naomi gasped. Sarah, her real name, the one she'd been struggling to remember. They know, she whispered, showing the others the text. Tiffany swore under her breath. Driver, change of plans? Take us to Extraction Point Beta. The SUV abruptly changed directions, cutting across several lanes of traffic. Horns blared around them as the driver executed a series of sharp turns. Are we being followed? Naomi asked, craning her neck to look out the rear window. Probably, Alexis said grimly. But don't worry, we've got contingencies for this. They drove in tense silence for several minutes, weaving through side streets and alleyways. Naomi's mind raced, trying to absorb everything she'd learned. A secret organization, transformations for nefarious purposes, a resistance movement. It was like something out of a spy thriller, yet she was living it. Suddenly, the SUV screeched to a halt. They had pulled into a dimly lit parking garage. Everybody out, Tiffany ordered. And leave your phones. They can track us through them. Naomi hesitated, reluctant to part with her last link to her old life. But seeing the others quickly ditching their devices, she followed suit. They hurried towards a nondescript door at the far end of the garage. Chelsea produced a key card, swiping it through a hidden reader. The door clicked open, revealing a stark hallway beyond. Welcome to the rabbit hole, Tiffany said, ushering Naomi inside. Things are about to get a whole lot weirder. The door sealed shut behind them with an ominous thud. Flickering fluorescent lights illuminated a long corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Where are we? Naomi asked, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. One of our safe houses, Alexis explained as they walked briskly down the hall.
It's an old Cold War-era bunker, repurposed for our needs, off the grid and shielded from most forms of surveillance. They passed several unmarked doors before stopping at one near the end of the corridor. Chelsea entered a complex code into a keypad, and the heavy metal door swung open. Naomi's eyes widened as she stepped inside. The room was a stark contrast to the bare hallway outside. Banks of computer monitors lined one wall, displaying scrolling data and what looked like security camera feeds. A large table dominated the center of the room, covered in maps and documents. And along another wall... Oh my God, Naomi breathed. A series of photographs were pinned to a corkboard. Some showed people she recognized, herself included, in their pre-transformation states. Others displayed the same individuals post-change, with notes and strings connecting various images. Our investigation board, Tiffany explained. We've been tracking Glamour Girl's activities for months, trying to piece together the bigger picture. Naomi approached the board, drawn to the photo of her former self. Sarah, she reminded herself. That was her real name. How did you get these? She asked, reaching out to touch the image. We have our sources, Chelsea said. Ex-employees who've turned against the organization. Hacked databases. It's taken a lot of work to gather this much intel. Naomi turned back to the group, her head swimming with questions. So what happens now? How do we stop them? And
Can the transformations be reversed? The others exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Alexis spoke. We're working on all of that, but it's complicated. The transformations aren't just physical, there's a psychological component too. That's why so many people don't question what's happened to them. Their memories are altered, new personalities implanted. But we remembered, Naomi pointed out. We broke through the conditioning.
Tiffany nodded. Some people do. We're not sure why. Maybe the process isn't perfect, or maybe some individuals are more resistant to it. Either way, it's given us a fighting chance. A sudden beeping from one of the computer terminals interrupted their conversation. Chelsea rushed over, her fingers flying across the keyboard. We've got incoming, she announced tersely. Looks like they tracked us faster than we thought. Tiffany swore. How long do we have? Chelsea shook her head. Minutes, maybe. They're good. All right, initiate Protocol Omega, Tiffany ordered. Naomi, I'm sorry, but we don't have time for a full briefing. You're going to have to trust us. Before Naomi could respond, Alexis was at her side with a small black case. This might hurt a bit, she warned, opening the case to reveal a syringe filled with an iridescent liquid. Naomi recoiled. What is that? A safeguard, Tiffany explained quickly. It'll temporarily suppress the tracking nanites in your bloodstream. Yes, that's a thing, we'll explain later, and make it harder for them to find you. But we need to move fast. Naomi hesitated, her mind reeling. Part of her wanted to refuse, to demand more answers. But the urgency in Tiffany's voice and the sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway made the decision for her. Do it, she said, extending her arm. Alexis swabbed the injection site with practiced efficiency and plunged the needle home. Naomi gasped as liquid fire seemed to course through her veins. It'll pass in a moment, Alexis assured her. Deep breaths. As the burning sensation began to fade, Chelsea was ushering them towards a hidden panel in the wall. This way, she said, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. The tunnel will lead you to a secondary exit. We'll hold them off here and meet you at the rendezvous point. We can't just leave you, Naomi protested, but Tiffany was already pushing her towards the opening. We'll be fine, Tiffany insisted. This isn't our first rodeo. Now go! With a final reluctant glance back, Naomi allowed herself to be guided into the dark passage. The panel slid shut behind them, plunging them into near total darkness. A small flashlight clicked on, illuminating Alexis's determined face. Stay close, she instructed, and whatever you do, don't stop moving. They hurried through the cramped tunnel, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the damp walls. Naomi's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. She had gone from cautiously investigating her transformation to being swept up in a full-blown conspiracy. And now she was fleeing through secret passages with people she barely knew, running from a shadowy organization that had already stolen her identity once. After what felt like an eternity of twists and turns, they emerged into a small, debris-filled lot behind an abandoned building. A battered pickup truck was parked nearby, its engine already running. Get in, Alexis said, climbing into the driver's seat. We need to put some distance between us and this place before they figure out where we've gone. As they pulled onto the street, Naomi finally found her voice again. Where are we going? Alexis kept her eyes on the road, deftly navigating through late-night traffic. Somewhere they won't think to look for us. We've got a network of safe houses across the city, but we need to be careful. Glamour Girls has eyes everywhere. Naomi nodded, then frowned as a thought occurred to her. Wait, if they have such a wide reach, how do you know who to trust? Couldn't anyone in your group be a plant? A grim smile flickered across Alexis's face. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've developed some ways to verify each other's identities, but it's never foolproof. Trust is a luxury we can't always afford. They drove in silence for a while, taking a circuitous route through the city. Naomi watched the familiar skyline recede in the rearview mirror, replaced by rows of warehouses and industrial buildings.
Finally, Alexis pulled into a small parking lot behind a nondescript office building. "We're here," she announced, killing the engine. "Let's move quickly. We don't want to be exposed for long." They hurried across the lot to a side entrance. Alexis punched in another complex code, and they slipped inside. Unlike the high-tech bunker they'd left behind, this safe house was Spartan, just a few rooms with basic furnishings and a small kitchenette. "It's not much," Alexis said apologetically, "but it's secure. We should be safe here for now." Naomi sank onto a worn couch, the events of the night finally catching up to her. Her arm still ached faintly from the injection, and her head was spinning with questions.
"I know this is a lot to take in," Alexis said, sitting down across from her.
"But we don't have the luxury of time. The others will be here soon, assuming they weren't captured. We need to figure out our next move." Naomi took a deep breath, trying to center herself. "Okay," she said. "Where do we start?" Alexis leaned forward, her expression intense. "With what you found on Daniel's phone, that contact could be our best lead yet on the inner workings of Glamour Girls. If we can trace it back to the source." She trailed off as the sound of a car engine cut through the quiet. Both women tensed, Alexis reaching for a concealed weapon. "Stay here," she whispered, moving towards the window. Naomi held her breath, straining to hear any sign of danger. After a moment, Alexis relaxed slightly. "It's them," she said, relief evident in her voice. The door opened, admitting a disheveled but unharmed Tiffany and Chelsea.
"We made it!"
Tiffany announced, collapsing into a chair. "But it was close. They're getting better at anticipating our moves." Chelsea nodded grimly. "We lost a lot of equipment in the escape. They'll be combing through everything we left behind, looking for clues." "Did they follow you?" Naomi asked anxiously. "I don't think so," Tiffany replied. "We took every precaution, but we can't stay here long. They'll be sweeping the entire city for us." Alexis quickly filled the others in on what Naomi had found on Daniel's phone. As she spoke, Naomi noticed the women exchanging loaded glances, seeming to have an entire conversation without words. "What is it?" she asked when Alexis finished. "What aren't you telling me?" The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, Chelsea spoke up. "We think we might know who the GG liaison is," she said carefully. "And if we're right, it changes everything." Tiffany nodded solemnly.
"We've suspected for a while that there might be someone high up in the government involved with Glamour Girls. But we could never prove it. Until now," Alexis added. "The phone number you found, it matches one we've been trying to trace for months. It belongs to a secure line in the Department of Defense."
Naomi felt the blood drain from her face. "The military is involved in this?" "A faction within it, at least," Tiffany confirmed. "We don't know how deep it goes. But it would explain a lot, the advanced technology, the ability to make people disappear so completely." "So what do we do?" Naomi asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The others exchanged grim looks. "We need proof," Chelsea said. "Hard evidence that links Glamour Girls to whoever is pulling the strings in the government. Without that, we're just conspiracy theorists." "And to get that proof," Tiffany added, "we need to go straight to the source." Alexis nodded. "We need to infiltrate Glamour Girls' headquarters." Naomi's eyes widened. "Is that even possible? You said they have eyes everywhere." "It won't be easy," Tiffany admitted. "But we might have an advantage they're not expecting." She turned to Naomi, her expression serious. "You." "Me?" Naomi repeated, confused. "But they know I've gone rogue. They're hunting for me." "Exactly," Chelsea said. "Which means they'll be looking for you to run, to hide. They won't expect you to walk right through their front door." Understanding dawned on Naomi. "You want me to pretend I've had a change of heart? To go back to them willingly?" Tiffany nodded. "It's risky, I know. But you're our best shot at getting someone on the inside. You're still new enough that they might believe you were just confused, that you panicked. If we can convince them you want to fully embrace your transformation..." I could gather the evidence we need," Naomi finished. Her heart raced at the thought. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. A chance to take control, to fight back against those who had stolen her life. "You don't have to do this," Alexis said gently. "We can find another way." Naomi took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "No," she said firmly. "I want to. I need to know why they chose me, why they did this to me, and if I can help stop them from doing it to anyone else."
"I have to try."
The others nodded solemnly.
"All right," Tiffany said. "Then we've got a lot of work to do. We need to create a convincing story for your return, set up fail-safes, figure out exactly what we're looking for once you're inside."
As the group began to plan, Naomi felt a strange mix of fear and determination settle over her. She thought of her old life, of the person she used to be, Sarah. That woman felt like a stranger now, but she owed it to her, to herself, to uncover the truth. Whatever came next, there was no going back. Naomi was in this fight now, all the way to the end. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. The small safe house became a hive of planning and preparation. Tiffany and Chelsea pored over blueprints and security protocols, trying to identify potential weak points in Glamour Girl's defenses. Alexis worked on creating a convincing digital trail to support Naomi's cover story. As for Naomi herself, she found herself undergoing a crash course in espionage. The others took turns drilling her on everything from basic surveillance techniques to how to react if she was caught in a lie. "Remember," Tiffany emphasized, "the key is to stick as close to the truth as possible. The best lies are built on a foundation of honesty." Naomi nodded, trying to absorb it all. "So, I tell them I got scared, that I panicked when I started remembering things from my old life." "Exactly," Chelsea confirmed.
"You can even admit to seeking out information about your past, but stress that it only made you more confused, more certain that you wanted to fully embrace your new identity."
"What if they ask about you?" Naomi worried. "About what happened at the bar?" Alexis spoke up. "We've created a cover for that too. As far as they know, we're just other transformed individuals you encountered. You can say we tried to recruit you to some half-baked resistance movement, but that it only made you realize how much you wanted to return to Glamour Girls." Naomi's head spun with all the layers of deception. "How do you keep it all straight?" Tiffany gave her a grim smile. "Practice, unfortunately. We've all had to learn to live double lives." As the night wore on, exhaustion began to set in. Naomi found herself fighting to keep her eyes open, the events of the past 24 hours finally catching up to her. "Get some rest," Alexis urged, noticing her fatigue. "We'll need you sharp tomorrow." Naomi nodded gratefully, curling up on the worn couch. As she drifted off to sleep, her mind swirled with fragments of plans and half-formed fears. She dreamed of mazes and mirrors, of faces that shifted and changed. In the dream, she was running, always running, but she couldn't tell if she was fleeing from something or racing towards it. A hand on her shoulder jolted her awake. Naomi blinked, disoriented, to find Tiffany standing over her. "It's time," Tiffany said softly. "Are you ready?" Naomi sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Sunlight streamed through the grimy windows, indicating she'd slept for at least a few hours. The others were already up and moving, a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. "As ready as I'll ever be," Naomi replied, trying to project more confidence than she felt. They gathered around a small table for a final briefing. Chelsea handed Naomi a sleek smartphone. "This has been specially modified," she explained. "It'll allow you to communicate with us securely, and it has some hidden features that should help you gather evidence. But be careful, it'll look like a normal phone to anyone else. So don't let your guard down." Naomi nodded, slipping the device into her pocket. "What's my first move?" "We've arranged for you to coincidentally run into Daniel at a cafe near Glamour Girls headquarters," Tiffany said. "It's a place he frequents for lunch. Your job is to make contact, to convince him you want to come in from the cold, so to speak." And if he doesn't bite? Naomi asked. Alexis's expression was grim. Then we move to plan B, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. They spent a few more minutes going over contingencies and last-minute details. Finally, there was nothing left to do but begin. Remember, Tiffany said as they prepared to leave the safe house, we'll be monitoring as best we can, but once you're inside Glamour Girls, you'll largely be on your own. Trust your instincts. If anything feels off, abort the mission. Your safety is the priority. Naomi nodded, a lump forming in her throat. The reality of what she was about to do was finally sinking in. She was walking into the lion's den, armed with little more than her wits and a hastily constructed cover story. Hey, Chelsea said softly, noticing her apprehension. You got this. You're stronger than you know. Naomi managed a small smile. Thanks. I can't help feeling like I'm in over my head. We all felt that way at first, Alexis assured her. But you're not alone. We've got your back, no matter what happens. With final hugs and whispered words of encouragement, Naomi set out. The others would be monitoring from a distance, ready to intervene if necessary. But for now, she was on her own. The cafe was busy when Naomi arrived, the lunchtime crowd in full swing. She ordered a coffee and found a seat with a clear view of the entrance, her nerves jangling with each chime of the bell above the door. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 20 minutes, Daniel walked in. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. This was it. She waited until he had ordered and was looking for a seat before making her move. Standing abruptly, she let out a tiny gasp, loud enough to catch his attention. Daniel's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed suspiciously. Naomi, he said coolly. This is unexpected. Naomi summoned every ounce of acting ability she possessed. Daniel, I'm so glad I ran into you, she stammered, infusing her voice with a mixture of relief and anxiety. I've been wanting to talk to you, to explain. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what exactly did you want to explain? Your little stunt with my phone, perhaps? Naomi flinched, letting real shame color her features. I'm so sorry about that, she said quietly. I was confused, scared. I didn't know what I was doing. She glanced around the crowded cafe. Could we talk somewhere more private? Please. I know I don't deserve it, but I need help. Daniel studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded towards an empty table in a secluded corner. You have 5 minutes, he said. Make them count. As they sat down, Naomi's heart raced. Everything hinged on the next few minutes. She took a deep breath and began to spin her carefully crafted tale. I started having these flashes, she said, her voice low and urgent. Memories, I think, from before. It scared me. I didn't understand what was happening. That's why I went to my old apartment, why I looked at your phone. I was desperate for answers. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but Naomi could see the calculating look in his eyes. She pressed on. But the more I learned, the more confused I became. Everything felt wrong, like I was trapped between 2 different lives. And then those women approached me at the bar. What women? Daniel interrupted sharply. Naomi feigned surprise. You mean you don't know? They said they were part of some group fighting against Glamour Girls. They tried to convince me that my transformation was wrong, that I needed to join them to undo it. She leaned in, letting desperation seep into her voice. But that's not what I want, Daniel. Being with them, hearing their plans, it made me realize how much I want this life. The life Glamour Girls gave me. I don't want to go back to who I was before. I want to fully embrace who I am now. Daniel's eyes narrowed. And why should I believe you? How do I know this isn't some ploy? Naomi met his gaze steadily. Because I'm here, she said simply. I could have run, could have disappeared. Instead, I'm asking for help. I want to come back, to complete whatever process I interrupted. Please, Daniel. I know I messed up, but I want to make it right. Silence stretched between them as Daniel considered her words. Naomi held her breath, acutely aware that her entire mission hung in the balance. Finally, Daniel spoke.
If what you're saying is true, then you've put yourself in a very precarious position, Naomi. The organization doesn't look kindly on those who try to break away. I know, Naomi said softly, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove my loyalty, to show that I'm committed to this new life. Daniel nodded slowly. It won't be easy. There will be tests, evaluations. The process to fully integrate you may be intensified, given the circumstances.
Naomi suppressed a shudder at the implications of his words, but she forced herself to nod eagerly.
I understand. I'm ready for whatever comes next.
Daniel studied her for another long moment before seeming to come to a decision. He pulled out his phone and fired off a quick text.
All right, he said, standing. We're going to take a little trip. If you're serious about this, come with me now. But understand, once we leave this cafe, there's no turning back. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?
Naomi stood, squaring her shoulders. Yes, she said firmly.
I'm sure.
As they walked out of the cafe, Naomi felt a mix of triumph and terror. She had passed the first test, had gotten her foot in the door, but she knew the real challenges were only just beginning. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. As Daniel opened the door for her, Naomi allowed herself one last glance at the busy street behind them. Somewhere out there, her newfound allies were watching, ready to support her if things went wrong. Taking a deep breath, Naomi slid into the car. The door closed with a soft thud, sealing her into the next phase of her dangerous mission. As the car pulled away from the curb, Naomi's mind raced. She had done it, convinced Daniel of her sincerity, at least enough to get her foot in the door. But what came next? Where were they taking her? The car's windows were tinted, making it difficult to track their route. Naomi tried to maintain a calm facade, but her heart hammered in her chest. Beside her, Daniel tapped away at his phone, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only about 20 minutes, the car slowed and turned into an underground parking garage. As they descended, Naomi caught glimpses of heavy security measures, reinforced doors, camera arrays, armed guards at checkpoints.
Welcome to Glamour Girls, Daniel said as the car came to a stop. Or at least one of our facilities.
He led her through a series of corridors, each requiring different levels of clearance. Naomi tried to memorize the route, but the twists and turns soon became a confusing blur. Finally, they arrived at a stark white room that looked like a cross between a medical exam room and an interrogation chamber. A severe-looking woman in a lab coat was waiting for them.
This is Dr. Evelyn Marsh, Daniel introduced. She'll be overseeing your reintegration process.
Dr. Marsh's piercing gaze swept over Naomi, making her feel like a specimen under a microscope. So, this is our wayward subject, she said, her voice cool and clinical. Interesting. Your neural patterns show significant deviation from our last baseline. We have quite a bit of work ahead of us. Naomi swallowed hard. What exactly does that mean? The doctor's lips curved in what might have been a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. It means, my dear, that we need to run some tests, extensive ones. We need to understand exactly how much of your original programming has degraded. She gestured to a reclining chair in the center of the room, bristling with wires and monitoring equipment. Shall we begin? Naomi hesitated, eyeing the chair warily. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she knew that wasn't an option. She had come too far to back out now. Of course, she said, forcing a smile. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. As she settled into the chair, Dr. Marsh began attaching electrodes to her temples and forehead. The cold gel made Naomi shiver. Now, Dr. Marsh said, her tone almost conversational, I want you to relax and focus on the screen in front of you. You may feel some discomfort, but try to remain still. A large monitor lowered from the ceiling, filling Naomi's field of vision. Strange patterns began to flash across it, pulsing in time with a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. At first, the sensation was merely uncomfortable. But as the minutes ticked by, the discomfort grew into a sharp, insistent pain. Naomi gritted her teeth, fighting the urge to cry out. "Fascinating," Dr. Marsh murmured, studying a tablet filled with scrolling data. "Your resistance to the reintegration protocols is quite remarkable. Most subjects are fully compliant by this point." Daniel, who had been watching silently from the corner, stepped forward. "Is that going to be a problem?" Dr. Marsh shook her head. "On the contrary, it presents an intriguing challenge. We'll need to adjust our approach, of course. Perhaps a more intensive method." She tapped a few commands into her tablet. The patterns on the screen shifted, becoming more intricate, more insistent. The hum deepened, burrowing into Naomi's skull like a physical force. Naomi couldn't hold back a gasp of pain. Her vision blurred, memories and sensations blending together in a dizzying swirl. She saw flashes of her old life, of the person she used to be, but they were quickly overwhelmed by a flood of new images. Glamorous parties, adoring fans, the intoxicating rush of being in the spotlight. "That's it," Dr. Marsh encouraged. "Don't fight it. Let the new you take control." Naomi wanted to resist, to hold on to her true self, but it was getting harder and harder to remember why. The pain was fading now, replaced by a seductive warmth. It would be so easy to just let go, to embrace this glittering new identity. No, she couldn't give in. Naomi clung to the memory of Tiffany, of Chelsea and Alexis. She thought of all the other women who had been transformed against their will. She had a mission. She had to stay strong. With a monumental effort, Naomi forced her eyes open. I need a break, she gasped. "Please." Dr. Marsh frowned, clearly displeased, but after a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Very well, a short respite may actually enhance the effectiveness of the next phase. Daniel, why don't you show our guest to the recovery room?" As Daniel helped Naomi out of the chair, her legs buckled beneath her. He caught her easily, supporting her weight as they made their way down another maze-like corridor. "You're stronger than we anticipated," Daniel murmured, his tone a mixture of admiration and suspicion. "But don't push yourself too hard. The process will be easier if you don't resist." Naomi managed a weak nod, not trusting herself to speak. Her head was still spinning, fragments of real and implanted memories battling for dominance. The recovery room turned out to be a small, comfortable space with a plush bed and a private bathroom. As soon as Daniel left, locking the door behind him, Naomi stumbled to the toilet and emptied the contents of her stomach. Shaking, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror. She looked pale and drawn, but her eyes were still her own. She hadn't broken. Not yet. Naomi fumbled for the hidden compartment in her bra where she had stashed the modified phone. Her fingers trembled as she typed out a quick message to her allies. "Inside, some kind of mental reprogramming. Holding on for now, but it's intense. Any advice?" She hit send and waited anxiously for a response. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, the phone buzzed. Tiffany's reply was terse but reassuring. "You're doing great. Remember your training? Focus on a core memory, something they can't touch. It'll help anchor you. We're working on an extraction plan. Stay strong." Naomi took a deep breath, trying to center herself. A core memory. She thought back to her childhood, to a day at the beach with her parents, the sound of the waves, the taste of salt on her lips, the warmth of the sun on her skin. She clung to that memory, letting it ground her in reality. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Quickly, she stashed the phone away and composed herself. "Come in," she called, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. It was Daniel, his expression unreadable. "Break time's over," he said. "Dr. Marsh is ready for you." Naomi nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. As they walked back to the exam room, she focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on maintaining the facade of eager compliance. Dr. Marsh was waiting for them, a predatory smile on her face. "Feeling refreshed?" she asked. "Good, because we're about to take things to the next level." This time, instead of the chair, Naomi was directed to what looked like a high-tech tanning bed. As she lay down, Dr. Marsh began attaching a complex array of sensors and electrodes to her body. "This device allows for a more immersive experience," Dr. Marsh explained. "It will stimulate all of your senses, helping to fully integrate your new identity." The top of the machine lowered, encasing Naomi in darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of her own rapid breathing. Then, suddenly, she was assaulted by a cacophony of sights, sounds, and sensations. She was on a runway, the roar of the crowd deafening as she strutted down the catwalk. She was at a glittering gala, champagne fizzing on her tongue as she charmed billionaires and celebrities. She was on a private yacht, the sun warm on her skin as she posed for a magazine shoot. Each scenario felt incredibly real, down to the smallest detail. Naomi could smell the perfume she was wearing, feel the texture of the expensive fabrics against her skin. It was intoxicating, seductive, everything she had ever dreamed of being. But underneath it all, there was a wrongness she couldn't shake. These weren't her dreams. They were someone else's vision, imposed on her without her consent. Naomi clung to her core memory, to the sound of waves and the taste of salt. She was more than this glittering facade. She had a purpose, a mission to complete. Time lost all meaning inside the machine. It could have been minutes or hours before the bombardment of sensations finally ceased. When the top lifted, Naomi blinked in the sudden light, feeling disoriented and drained. Dr. Marsh was beaming as she helped Naomi sit up. "Remarkable progress," she said. "Your neural pathways are aligning beautifully with the new template. How do you feel?" Naomi swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had to play along, had to make them believe it was working. "I feel amazing," she said, infusing her voice with awe. "Like I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be." Daniel, who had been observing silently, nodded in approval. "Excellent. I think you're ready for the next phase." Thanks for watching. Check out Patreon if you want to have early access to the other parts. If not, it will be online in a couple of days.